Welcome to Zubaan's Cultures of Peace Program 2020. Today we are joined by Angela Rangad from Meghalaya. Angela Rangad is a democratic rights and socialist feminist activist from Meghalaya. She trained as an anthropologist at NEHU and as an INLAKS scholar from the School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London, where she pursued a postgraduate course in Anthropology of Development. Angela also has a degree in law from NEHU. She has also worked extensively on issues of rights and justice, whether it is related to land and natural resources, gender justice, health, or citizens' participation in governance. Thank you so much for joining us today, Angela.
Thank you.
And Angela, at the outset, we understand that you have been active in the women's movement in Meghalaya right from your college days, and you have worked on a range of issues regarding gender justice, reproductive rights, sexuality, LGBTQ rights. How do you see the changing role of women in Meghalaya? What are some of the issues challenging gender justice in Meghalaya?
So many of you will be aware that Meghalaya is known for having communities that follow the matrilineal system of lineage and inheritance. And this is to be celebrated, but in many ways it has also meant that it has been a different kind of challenge to talk about women's rights, because people assume that because it's matrilineal, they already women are empowered. Some women matriarchal society, which it is not. Uh, so earlier, the struggles, of some of the women's groups here, most of them were organized around localities. Then some more autonomous, independent women's groups came about, and um, I participated in some of their sort of programs. But a lot of the focus then was welfarist, about helping women out of poverty, or ensuring girls are better educated, but it was never put in a rights framework, and then, of course, some other NGOs, especially post the Beijing conference, came about, even in Meghalaya, and they shifted the focus a little to looking at rights of women, especially reproductive and sexual health and rights, etc. And of course, looking at decision making and participation of women in most of the, like here, the big issue has been participation of women at local self-governance institutions. And the struggle continues in terms of ensuring that women come forward more in positions of decision making, and even politically, for instance, as an electoral politics, women still don't participate as much. And I think we need to continue the struggle of looking at the rights of women as rights, not in a welfare mode, but also to try and emphasize now more than ever that we cannot look at women's rights in isolation. We need to actually also struggle and participate in the larger issues, because we will never be able to secure women's independence and freedom, for instance, if we don't look at, especially in the current state of things in this country, the larger freedoms which are under attack, or the other issues of actually participating full on in decision making, even at a political level.
Thank you so much, Angela. Angela, you're also associated with many women's organizations and movements such as Women Against Uranium Mining and TOOL. Could you please tell us about your associations with these groups and your activities?
So the Women Against Uranium Mining is like a network which we brought together in 2009. Many of you may be aware that this struggle against allowing the Indian state to mine uranium in West Khasi Hills, now Southwest Khasi Hills, after the demarcation of new district. But the struggle has been going on, and then, it's like in fits and starts, okay, because there has always been a resistance. The resistance has been, number one, there has been this lady who sadly passed away very recently, who happened to be the owner of this large tracts of land on which the uranium ore deposits were found. She refused, UCIL refused to allow them to mine after they initially tried exploratory mining, and she saw the negative and bad impact of even just that exploratory mining. So she has been actually the person who has really upheld the resistance against uranium mining. And then, of course, the Khasi Students' Union has been at the forefront of ensuring that there's no mining. Then we would participate in their programs, etc. But in 2009, there was a kind of a fresh and very aggressive attempt, even from the Khasi Hills Autonomous District Council Executive Committee then, which was headed by a person called H.S. Chilla, who was actually trying to facilitate uranium mining by talking about road expansion, development projects for that area. And we felt that it was really important to bring women together to look at this issue, because many, it's almost like, subcontracting an issue, thinking that the KSU will do it and this old lady will continue her resistance. And people in Shillong and all were quite happy not to actively participate, even women's groups. And we thought that it was very important that our voices are collectively heard, and that even we show, a very clear resistance to uranium mining. So that's when this network came about. Then as far as Tur or Thma Urangi Juki is concerned, it's an organization which is not a registered organization. We very consciously chose not to register it because we didn't feel the need for it. We didn't also want to be seen as an NGO, because in our experience, it has been also that sometimes it's been difficult to work with formal funded NGOs who at that level are quite depoliticized and don't participate in the same mode as one would in movements, So we were very conscious that Tur should just be a kind of an association that brings people together. We collaborate on issues with other organizations. And in fact, there are certain issues on which we agree with some organizations, the very organizations which we will disagree with on some other issues. So Tur is a network of people, and we look at, it's easier to describe ourselves as an organization that looks at the larger democratic rights, which includes women's rights, human rights, and other issues, So that's what Tur is. And it formally sort of came together in 2013.
A lot of us are associated with many organizations, and you're talking about women against uranium mining and Tur as networks. How easy it is to work, or how difficult it is to work as a network than as one organization?
I think when the issues at hand are very clear and people's respective positions on that issue is clear, then it is not so difficult to come together. Like, for instance, very clearly on the uranium issue, we come together with, say, the Khasi Students' Union. Whereas when it comes to, for instance, looking at rights of women, this very students' union can be very regressive in their stand and look at women as being these needed to be controlled and the ones who have to, bearers of tradition and all that. And sometimes these networks, when we come together physically, at protests, it also gives us opportunity to take a dig at each other's position on even other issues where we don't agree. So it's fun. But again, it's not easy. For instance, on the women's question, it's very easy to build networks with women's groups, but not as easy to, say, build a network which brings in, say, the students' union or some other pressure groups, as they're called here, because they are at that level very patriarchal themselves. So depending on the issue, the challenges pose themselves as such.
I just remembered one thing, when you were speaking about tour and how the work that you have been doing with tour. I think tour was one of the networks spearheading a signature campaign against one of the former governor.
Oh yes, that
Yeah.
was such an unfortunate incident here, where this governor, Mr. Shanmuganathan, actually, you can't even say sexually harassed, because those people were not, I mean, it wasn't sexual harassment at workplace yet because they were not engaged yet, but he abused his position as the governor when these people had gone for an interview for a post that was vacant there. And one of the interviewees then stepped up and spoke about it. And when this whole issue came out, and so, I mean, the governor, we realized that what was happening was true, and we were happy that this one person spoke up, because even before this incident, actually, there were rumors about this particular governor. And some people actually had come to us also saying that, these nurses were asked to go to the governor's house and every day, provide whatever hot sponging and all to this governor. And they were very uncomfortable with what they were asked to do. But they were so afraid to speak up then. This was like almost 2 years before this incident blew up finally. Being government, employees, they never spoke up. So when this incident happened and this one girl spoke up, we were really encouraged. And then also we spoke to the staff within the Raj Bhavan, who by that time had also organized themselves and decided to use that moment to speak up. And so it was actually in January, just around Republic Day. So he had gone off to Arunachal, as a chief guest or something, whereas here we were organizing protests outside the governor's house and collecting signatures, but mostly a physical protest outside the gates, asking him to step down. Initially, I think they thought they'll just bluster through and that nothing will happen. But I think the pressure became immense, especially when the staff within the Raj Bhavan also sort of protested and supported this girl and, joined in the protest. So he finally stepped down. But we feel that, sometimes, like, he stepped down, but where is he now? We sometimes fear that he continues to, abuse his position and his power wherever he is, because he wasn't really, booked for what he did. But nonetheless, it was like an affirmative step, at least for the people who were abused, by him.
While the case didn't have the kind of implications or the achievements which you wanted, like he should be booked for his crime. But on the other hand, it sparked hope for a lot of people and helped them speak out, which I think is one of the major steps towards getting justice. And while talking about mining in Meghalaya, uh, you were also one of the authors of Curse of Coal, a citizen's report on the coal mining in Meghalaya. And this report was used by the Supreme Court to intervene in the illegal coal mining issue in Meghalaya, which is a major, cause of conflict in the area. How and why did you do that study, and what were some of the findings?
So, mining in Meghalaya, has happened for a long time. Post-colonial time, there were at that level very small scale traditional mining. But after the mid 80s in Janta Hills, suddenly there was this proliferation of mining. And the method used also is something called rat hole mining, where they have this huge shaft and then they go in, through the smaller sort of crevices. And that's why they say they even use children to sort of dig out the coal, which is very dangerous, but also unscientific. But that's the only form of mining that is possible also, given the kind of the geological formation of the seams, etc. Now, mining in Janta Hills has been going on for a while, and there hasn't been at that level any challenge posed, whether from the environmental destruction point of view or from anybody cross-checking on how much revenue really is the state getting from mining. Is it worth it, And for us, actually, we were also at that level mute spectators for quite a while, because we are not there in the district, and we know also that we will not be able to remote controlly, do something. And we would talk to groups that are there, individuals who are there who are concerned. So that was how it was for a while. And we would help, for instance, people who wanted to file RTIs to understand about mining more. We were there. We would do all of those things, but that was about it, our intervention earlier. Then in 2018, a friend of ours got brutally attacked there because she was following up on the illegal mining that happened post the NGT ban. There was a case, in the Supreme Court by the Students' Union. The Students' Union, who, not even from here, it's like Assam, because there was this pollution of the rivers which was happening because of the mining here. So they filed a case in the Supreme Court, and then that led to, in the NGT, sorry, and that led to a ban on rat hole mining. And there were certain specifications which the NGT said we had to do. We had to stop mining, and any extra coal which was already mined had to be transported in a particular way, this, that. And our friend Agnes Kharshing was very diligently following up on the orders of the NGT. So she was actually literally physically following trucks to see whether they had the NGT sticker, which meant they were the trucks which were allowed, to pick up the already mined coal, because mining was banned. But she realized also that actually there was fresh mining happening. There was this illegal transportation of coal. So she would follow these trucks and all that. And in 2018, she had gone to Janta Hills to follow up on a story like that, to again take pictures and all. And she was attacked, brutally attacked. Fortunately, she survived that attack. And that point was actually a moment for us, in Tur. We realized that we have to do more in terms of getting our heads around what is happening with this NGT ban and how really is this illegality still continuing and all that. So we got down and we dug up old documents, old RTIs, and read up on the laws and put together this document of Curse of Coal, because the case in the Supreme Court where the miners were challenging the NGT ban, they kept asking for transportation orders, was still happening in the court. So we thought that it was an opportunity for us to write and give the documents and any evidence which we had on the ground about what really was happening with coal mining. So that was what the report was about. And the major findings is that obviously it's like coal mining. We keep saying, Northeast, Meghalaya included, it's like we are under the curse of being resource rich and resource blessed, But what has happened is that obviously environmental destruction has been massive. That goes without saying. But what has also come along with this environmental destruction is a creation of a certain political class and a mafia raj, which actually we have never seen in Meghalaya before. And that is what is more frightening, because in this current dispensation especially, so many of the elected representatives are actually coal miners, and that money funded them to where they are. And so we worry that even right now, as we speak, they are trying to subvert whatever orders that have come from the court. And it's possible because they are the ruling class. And there's also a certain sort of culture of violence that has come with this kind of rampant coal mining. It's like you have money, so you control everything. And now you even have political power. So violence is just an adjunct of that. And we fear that if this is not challenged, it's going to irreparably change the political formations in Meghalaya, which was mean will impact everything, So that's what is there about coal.
It's really frightening, like how, as you say, a blessing of rich resources can bring about such a frightening change of order and as you say, mafia rights in governance. You have been advocating people's right to participation in governance, and through many campaigns like such as RTI and Lokayukta. Can you tell us something about campaigns that you have been involved with, and perhaps about some of the strategies that you have worked with?
Okay. So the RTI struggle, I think because when we started, we were also very young then. So it's really something very close to our heart because it actually taught us a lot about movements, about struggles, about strategy. So, much before the law came in the country, there was a person by the name of Michael Aim who would go around town putting up these signages saying that give us the right to information. If Goa has it and Delhi has it, we should have it also. So sometimes singularly, he would, every time there's an assembly session, he would be protesting alone. And we knew him. Then we started joining in his demand for a law, a state law. So much before the national law came about, we actually had the Meghalaya Right to Information movement, where we were demanding for a state law. And that never happened. And then I think the National Campaign for People's Right to Information was also at that time nationally mobilizing for a national law. And somebody had come over to Meghalaya and they contacted us because they heard about the local movement here demanding for the state law. So we started being part of the national campaign as well. We continued to ask to demand for a state law, but by that time we were also associated with the national campaign. Then, of course, the national law came through and we insisted, initially they were saying that it would cover only central agencies, a national law. But from our struggle in the state, trying to get a state law, we realized that many states are not going to legislate. So we insisted that this law should actually cover all states, irrespective of even if states have their own laws, like Delhi, Goa had their own laws, and people could choose whether they wanted to use the central law or the state law, and that it has to cover state governments as well, and not just central government agencies, So it was a real experience because we were able to be part of the Parliamentary Standing Committee where we made submissions. So one was that it should cover all states. And the other thing for us in the region was that we live in a place which is so militarized, the entire region. And initially, when the law was being drafted, there were attempts to actually give a blanket exemption to the armed forces. And we felt that it's useless, especially for us in the region, if the armed forces don't come under the ambit of the RTI, because our experience has been that there's so much corruption through, the militancy everywhere in the region has also meant a lot of corruption. And the armed forces, not only that there are abuses, human rights violations, but also actual, financial corruption and all that. So we insisted again in our submissions that there shouldn't be a blanket sort of exemption for them, but that when it came to corruption and human rights abuses, they should very much also be answerable and accountable. And we're happy that the law finally is like that they don't are not exempted from the RTI if we can prove that what we are asking actually pertains to corruption and human rights abuses. So that was our experience of the RTI. And in terms of strategy, we feel that Meghalaya was very successful in implementing the RTI from day one. When we realized that the law was coming through in Parliament, at every step we would actually have a street presence of some kind of protest or celebration. So when the bill was tabled, we had a celebration at Police Bazaar, just to show, because that became also like educational kind of thing for other people. That's how we were raising awareness about this law. And because we were demanding for a state law, then we finally got the national law. So there was already so much interest and information constantly in the newspapers, etc., about such a thing as RTI. So after it got passed, for instance, in the Parliament, all states were given a period of 30 days within which to put their public information officers in place, the structures in place, all of that. So we had this RTI countdown clock, again in Police Bazaar, So every day we would remove the numbers and say like 28 days to the implementation of RTI, 20 days. And on the day when it became operational, we actually filed the first RTI on that very day itself, on this expenditure of beautifying this Police Bazaar in Shillong, So sometimes it wasn't even done as strategy, but we realized later that it was great strategy because people came to know about the RTI so much. So when it came about, people started using it, Unlike other states, because it was top down, there wasn't a movement demanding for it. People didn't know what this law was. So it remained a law in paper. But for here, RTI is like quite known, quite used. Of course, there were skeptics, the urban skeptics saying, oh, we doubt that there will be people who'll use it. How can people write? What will the people from the rural areas do? And you will be surprised that actually the more people who used RTI have been from the peripheries, have been people who have been concerned about their PDS, their schools, who have used RTI effectively. And from day one, we insisted that you write in local language, you just use a plain piece of paper. So we tried to sort of not make it this frightening law. And we continued to have locality-based, village-based, small programs with just 10, 15 people actually. And every program would end with us filing an RTI, It wasn't just a theoretical sort of thing. And so that's how it worked for us here. But then, of course, we felt that what next? Like you have the RTI, you get all your documents, there's corruption. Then what do you do after that? Because even we've held several public hearings and all, but again, to actually ensure a legal course of action against those who have abused their power and corrupted and all that, we found it was getting difficult because the only way was we could either file FIRs, which we did, and which was, again, another very interesting RTI story in Meghalaya, because there was this, he was an ex-CM also for a while, and the people in his constituency used RTI very effectively when he tried to get re-elected for the third time. They found that he was actually pilfering quite a lot from the rural development schemes. And he finally was unseated, because of that RTI. So, but we felt that even, for instance, for him, after we found out all these, we could pinpoint, the documents to that corruption, we still had to file an FIR in the normal course of the thing. And we felt that we need to then now think of maybe having another structure like the Lokayukta, because we saw Karnataka was doing really well then with having a very effective Lokayukta. That was the next logical step for us after having won the RTI battle. And so we began campaigning for a Lokayukta. And this campaign, again, was like quite a broad-based network. We had the pressure groups being part of the network, the students' union, the women's groups. And Meghalaya, again, has one of the best laws on the Lokayukta, because we actually took the laws from different states, Karnataka included, but we also insisted on, mechanisms like having a search and selection committee, because we didn't want political appointees, to be heading the Lokayukta, because there's no point in that. And of course, this experience was something which we learned even when we were struggling with Women's Commission. That's another story, I'll tell you about that. But so that's how we finally got the Lokayukta Act. And we had to keep struggling because we needed to keep pushing amendments also, because initially they weren't wanting it to be the usual. They thought it'll be a post-retirement place, for the babus and everybody. So some of those amendments we had to keep pushing through about who actually can be part of the Lokayukta and all that. But strangely, it could also be because the law was so good, they were actually worried about actually having it in place. So it took a while to actually have a Lokayukta in place. Then finally, since last year, we actually have a Lokayukta in place. And I think just recently, he has taken up suo motu some cases on corruption in the GHADC, etc. So we'll have to watch and see how that goes also.
Thank you, Angela, for sharing us your how you worked on your campaigns for RTI and Lokayukta. Those are really innovative and inspiring stories which you have shared with us today. You were mentioning something about the Women's Commission also.
Yeah. So, like I said, at the beginning that, Meghalaya, whether people watching us from outside also think we're empowered, and sometimes people from within also think that we're quite okay, and so we don't need affirmative action of any kind. And so we were one of the last states that got a women's commission. And the manner in which we got it also, is quite telling, because despite petitions on petitions which these local groups would give state governments here, they never bothered to put in place a state commission. Then finally, the National Commission for Women was coming here for a meeting, and they, I think, were questioning the state government on why is there no state women's commission. So overnight, literally overnight, like the meeting was tomorrow, and today the state government starts calling up some random women, asking them to be members and chairpersons of a state commission. So they put together this commission overnight so that they don't lose face when the National Commission comes. And we heard about it. So some of us who have been campaigning for the Women's Commission, especially this old organization, comprising of these women's groups across localities and all this, Lumpung Kisenkanthe it's called, they were quite upset about the whole way in which this came about. And these were handpicked women who actually have never really been involved in women's issues, who happily sort of conceded to be part of this Women's Commission. So we also were invited to this, the National Commission meeting at Pinewood. And that was where they were going to formally announce this commission. So we, by calling up each other the entire night and all, we planned that we'll go to the meeting, but we will stand and protest there. So we had prepared these placards, and chart paper and A4 size paper, and we folded it and put it into our bags and all, and very almost slyly walked into the meeting. And then when the chief minister got up to address and announce the Women's Commission, several of us from across organizations got up with our placards saying move, because it was not done there was no consultation, it wasn't participatory, it was all hush hush and all that. So there's a little video I can share with you of this happening,
I believe we have started our today's work.
We just stood up, we showed the placard, and Kongsil said, Tipsi, Sylvia Pariat, she said, then I said, we can't just be standing here and listening to Chief Minister talking, because we want to boycott his speech. We want to show our protest. So let's all walk out. So we walked out.
Well, the founding has got more significance in the sense of respect to the Chief Secretary, that the doctor. Well, year 2001 was observed as Women's Empowerment Year. We're glad we are the subject thing about empowerment of women. But must be
And so it was quite an interesting encounter we had. And the chief minister was quite foolish also, because he carried on with his speech. But after the meeting, he actually aggressively came, because by that time we walked out and we were standing outside still protesting. So he came and aggressively told us, this is not the way women should behave. First of all, you're invited to a meeting, and then if you have any grievance, you should write formally. So we said, yes, we've been writing for very long, but nothing happened. And we don't accept this commission. We need a commission, but do it properly. You open it out, call for names. So that protest actually then led to this whole idea of the search and selection committee. We said that the law also, we had to keep campaigning, because the law, they find the state commission law was so bad. Everything was like, they didn't have any powers. And it was unbelievable that those people who were handpicked to be part of this commission hadn't even read the law under which they were going to operate. And it was some of us and these groups who had been demanding, who then kept pushing for amendments for this law. And finally, the sort of law at least gave them some more powers than they were initially given. But during that struggle, we also insisted that there has to be a provision for a search and selection committee. You cannot just pick, your Mahila this and Mahila that to be people heading this commission. So in the second time around, when the commission was constituted, they actually went through that exercise of calling for names. Then the representatives sat and sort of narrowed down on the names, etc. Then, of course, now they've gone back to their own ways of appointing people they think are conducive. So that's the story about the Women's Commission.
I remember it now, seeing the pictures of the protest. I think Patricia was also there, Patricia was also there. So I remember seeing it now. when you tell the story. And it's really sad, like, how women commissions all over, not just Meghalaya, but many states, this has become sort of places, as you say, for retired people and for political appointments. And so a lot of trust that people have in women commissions, and the hope that women commission coming to a state would be for the empowerment of women and for gender justice is all dashed to the ground
Yeah.
as such. Angela, another part of your work and campaign has been for the grassroots people, whether it is for hawkers and street vendors or for workers in the unorganized sector. In fact, you are one of the founders of the Workers' Power of Meghalaya, which is a federation of more than, I believe, 13 workers' union, and
Yeah.
you're also actively active, especially with the Meghalaya and Greater Shillong Progressive Hawkers and Street Vendors Association. What prompted you to work on these issues, and what are the challenges that you faced while working on this aspect of human rights?
So sometimes we used to joke, that we are like a one-stop crisis center because we we get calls like on, say domestic violence. Then we also get calls on people not getting their pay or not getting an appointment after an interview. So initially we would run around on a case-by-case basis, especially on workers' rights. It's like somebody calls and talks about how there was manipulation in a particular interview or a selection process. So we would intervene. Somebody says they haven't got their pay or they have been sacked because they had to go on maternity leave. Then we realized that it is not possible to carry on a case by case basis like that. And it's also, we need to get people themselves to stand up and to start advocating for these rights, which is when we felt that it's important to start mobilizing people into unions. And so we started a campaign, a workers' campaign, workers' rights campaign, by a very simple thing of taking out a pamphlet talking about workers' rights in the context of Meghalaya, listing down some of those rights and asking provocative questions about, are you one of them who, are denied leave, denied your PF? And we stood in localities, bazaar areas, distributing these pamphlets and put our phone numbers and all there. And so from that, several people called. I remember the first call came from workers of a private hospital here. And when they would call, then we would ask them to organize a meeting. And through several meetings, then we actually arrive at the idea of, would you like to form a union? Because that is how you will be able to secure your rights. And so that way, step by step, every time we would get a call, or the already established union would then know some other worker in some other place, whether government or private, central government. Some of the unions are central government places of work. So that's how we went about forming unions with people. And immediately after they form unions, they would then list down their grievances and their immediate needs, vis-a-vis their workplace. And we would put together a kind of a charter of demands, and that particular union struggle would begin. So that is how we have these 13 unions. One of the biggest ones is the Meghalaya Electricity Corporation Union here. Because also, strangely, in Meghalaya, there's such a lot of contractual workers in government, contract workers and casual workers. Or they don't even have a provident fund even after working for 15 years. So that's how our work began. And that's how many of the unions now have been able to secure at least those bare minimum entitlements, as far as what is guaranteed under the labor laws. So then, of course, after so many unions came about, we felt that it's important for them to meet, to come together. So every time, we celebrate May Day together. And we felt that we ought to have a kind of a larger federation where we also then take up larger issues beyond just workers' rights. So that's how Workers' Power came about. And then as far as the Hawkers Association is concerned, we would observe every time we are around Police Bazaar area, we've actually seen evictions. And some of these evictions were very sort of violent. They would just be pushing and shoving and taking their products and just, deliberately stamping and destroying their goods. So it really sort of played on our conscience and worried us. So we first tried to find out what are the provisions and laws around hawking. And similarly, after understanding that, there is a possibility of actually organizing them around the current available legal regimes, we again took out a kind of, in the newspaper, this was, reached out saying that we would like to meet with any hawkers who face any problems of eviction and violence. And like that, we again got a call. They organized for a meeting. And after several meetings over some months, we formed the association. Through RTI, again, we found out, because there was a national law on hawking. Now, all states that didn't have a law were asked to just notify rules for the Central Act, okay? And Meghalaya didn't do that. They tried to come up with their own law because they realized the national law had very good provisions. And they came up with a Meghalaya law, which had removed all the enabling provisions for hawkers. So now we have also actually gone to court challenging the constitutional validity of the Meghalaya law, because there was already a national law which they refused to implement. So that is ongoing. And because that case is there in court also, there's a kind of a status quo which the court has said, which means that hawkers have been able to resume now for the past 4 years their work on the streets. And that kind of evictions which we saw 4 years ago, because there were some streets which had become empty also for fear of those evictions. That kind of eviction has stopped. So also there were many people exploiting the hawkers, not just the state government evicting these. Actually, people from municipality or police also, would harass them. They would take away their goods, not give them proper challans for their goods, and actually steal their goods. But it wasn't just these people of the state agencies, but also many NGOs and pressure groups, were extorting from the hawkers, saying that we will give you protection if you pay us every day some amount, And so that kind of thing also, at least for now, has stopped. And it is because they themselves have organized, come together, and understood their rights. And it's a very interesting association because it's one of the associations that cuts across, community lines. Like the Northeast, including Meghalaya, can be very divided, about insider, outsider, tribal, non-tribal. And this is one association that actually has membership ranging from both tribals and non-tribals, and they work together so well. And for 4 years now, they've managed to be together, to have this organization, to fight the case in court, which still continues. And they're really showing us the way forward, how an association should be.
Angela, you have also led campaigns challenging undemocratic and unjust in traditional practices and legislation such as the Village Administration Bill and the Lineage Bill. How far have your campaigns been successful in challenging these bills?
Right. The Village Administration Bill is a bill which was moved by the Khasi Hills Autonomous District Council. In many ways, it was a bill which is required because under the 6th schedule, the KHADC has a mandate to sort of look after, promote further self-governance, which is at the locality and village level in the form of the darbars, And for years, sometimes these darbars don't have elections, proper elections which are fair, free, and all that. And they have the same headman for years. So reforms were required. And a bill like the Village Administration Bill, which actually imagined certain positive reforms for grassroots organizations such as the Darbar, is something which was required. However, when we looked at the fine print of this bill and the provisions of this bill, we realized, number one, that they've missed out a basic question and of ensuring women's participation in these darbars. Because it has always, everybody has tried to pass it off as if it is traditional that women don't participate in the darbars, etc. But we found out and we knew that it wasn't true, Pre-colonial times, you actually had women leading and looking after villages. They were like the Gauburas. But post-colonial times is when the so-called tradition got invented that women should not fully participate. And it continued like that. So when I say not participate, I mean they're not allowed to elect or be elected as the village chiefs, etc. So when the Village Administration Bill was proposed, we said that if you're proposing a kind of legislation which will regulate these bodies, you cannot do it without ensuring women's participation. And so that was one of the major points we campaigned around. And it was a very, very contested kind of challenge. Eventually, the bill didn't go through precisely because of this. I mean, it doesn't stand the constitutional test also at that level. But in terms of locally, the debate was raging, and it was we could understand from that debate, how patriarchal our society here in Meghalaya is, because it wasn't just the men, but even some women who felt that some of us who are demanding this participation of women is something that they were not accepting. So the kind of mobilization that the other side did, they used all sorts of tactics. The usual thing that these women who are demanding participation are these new age modern women, many of them married to outsiders, So it became very ugly also at that level, because some of those people who were spearheading the Village Administration Bill took it very personally, that they were finding it difficult to push it through because of our resistance based on this demand for participation of women. And so they were going all around the state, having these meetings, mobilizing support for the bill, and they would begin by actually naming some of us, So it was very ugly. But till now, that bill has been stalled, and it at least has sort of made people think, because as I said, there were some women who were against us demanding for participation, because they really believe that culturally, traditionally, we ought not to take part in these darbars. But again, there were men, for instance, who understood what this struggle and the demand was all about. So as of now, the village administration bill is stalled. It had never got the assent of the governor. But that didn't prevent them from pushing this amendments to the Lineage Act. This Lineage Act is something which was there from before, which talked about at that level identity, who is a Khasi, and so very clearly actually being matrilineal. If a Khasi woman marries an outsider, because the children finally bear her surname, so they are Khasis, etc. That was quite clear in the original act, but they then tried to push for amendments of limiting the idea of who a Khasi is. And they even proposed that Khasis who marry non-Khasis should sort of be ostracized, and that their children cannot be Khasis. So those were some of the things which they were trying to push through these amendments, which again we opposed. And at that level, the Lineage Act, the kind of, because by that time, social media also, it was just 2 years ago. So the kind of activity that would happen on social media was at its height, much more than when it was during the village administration bill. So the Lineage Act, some of us who stood against these amendments, there was such a lot of personal bashing that was happening on social media platforms. And this was the same year, 2018, early 2018. Kong Agnes and myself were, stood up against these amendments. And we had also this public debate where we were debating, the members from the KHDC as well as the pressure groups, etc., on this bill. So post that very public debate, the kinds of comments which were there on social media, most actually instigating violence, and I feel that actually had a direct bearing on what happened then to Kong Agnes at the end of 2018, because this debate around the nastiness of the debate around this Lineage Act, created a certain culture of sort of, we should remove these difficult women from our paths, and, we should not bear up with them, and we should actually use our power and our means to teach them a lesson, and those kind of comments, And that build-up, I feel, actually is what resulted in Kong Agnes's attack also when she went for the coal issue, to Jaintia Hills. So, but as of now, again, the Lineage Act is stalled. The amendments to the Lineage Act have not gone through. So recently, again, there have been sort of people trying to say that we have to pushing the current KHDC dispensation to again take up the matter. So let's see where it goes.
Angela, you have been associated with Zubaan for some of his projects. Can you tell us a bit about your association with Zubaan, the work which you have done with Zubaan?
Yeah. So, I'm familiar about Zubaan's earlier avatar as Kali for women and their publications. And then recently, I think as part of your Cultures for Peace program, I was part of the mentoring of the fellows, who are part of the Zubaan fellowship. So that's my association with Zubaan.
So you have been mentoring some of the research fellows. So how did you feel like, working and reading the works, the project works of some of the young people?
It's always so nice, to engage with young people, because they challenge our ideas and our thoughts and push us to think anew. So some of those projects, especially those looking at gender relations in the region. And I think I'm looking forward to some of those writings. And I mean, there has not been as such too much mentoring that has been happening. It was just that one-off program on Skype which happened. After that, I have not unfortunately been in touch with those fellows. But interesting work that they have all proposed, and looking forward to reading them.
Angela, have you ever faced any kind of impediment in your career, in your life, because of your gender and also because of your ethnic identity? As you also mentioned before, from the nature of campaigns that you and your fellow activists have been engaged with, even like some of your fellow women activists, you mentioned Kong, Agnes, they were even beaten up, physically assaulted. What other kind of challenges do you have to put up with?
I think the challenges that we face will not be anything different from, say, the challenges that anybody who occupies a role of a dissenter would face, you know. So, I mean, the state obviously always attempts to make it difficult for us to do our work. Useless, sometimes unnecessary cases filed on very flimsy grounds, you know, when we have protests, etc. So those are some of the challenges which I think other people who do this kind of work also face. But the other, I won't call it an impediment, but I would call it a challenge for us here, is that at one level, we're a very small state and an even smaller community, you know. And that kind of familiarity sometimes makes it difficult to break down the barriers, you know. And there is, at that level, some amount of resentment that is there from a certain class of people, also because of, I mean, like it or not, I come from a certain class privilege as well, you know, and I think that is an impediment actually, because it makes sometimes it's an impediment in the sense that it's not easy to declass yourself or to fully, you know, try and not identify, but really be part of the people you're working with. It takes a while before that kind of acceptance is there. There can also sometimes be a kind of not mistrust, but you know, you come with your baggage of class, let's just say, and so I constantly have to negotiate that. And I think the other big thing then is that the class question here, while working on our issues, no, is something which is not focused on a lot by everybody in the same way, because the focus has always been so much on tradition, on, you know, the specialness of egalitarian tribal people that we are, etc. So trying to break down those categories and trying to actually pose concrete challenges to those ideas that are so accepted, you know, that we are better off than the rest of the country in terms of position of women. We're better off because we're tribal, and trying to really focus on the rot within, you know. So I feel that that continues to be a challenge.
I think that is really inspiring how despite the challenges that we are facing and it's much more challenging when you have to face the rot within than the rot without, like outside. So always it's always much more challenging. Another challenge that the whole world, not just us, is facing at the moment is that of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has affected lives and communities all over the world. How has it affected you and the community you live in and engage with?
Yeah. So, I mean, the pandemic has really been a disruption, and especially for us whose work depends on actually physically meeting people and organizing on the streets, uh, it has not been possible for the last few months. And some of the people we work with, especially, the pandemic has taken its toll in terms of, their ability to even eke out a living. And so that has been a major focus much of this year. For instance, for the hawkers also, they cooperated so much with the government during the lockdown. And yet when the unlocking happened, nobody remembered them of how to ensure that they are back on the streets to earn safely. And so for the past few months, we have been working on that, ensuring that they get back to the streets safely. The association, in collaboration with the government, has done programs of teaching the membership on COVID and how to protect oneself. Because I think the way things are going, we are going to have to actually live with this, with COVID for some time now. So we need to know how. But the other thing is that the pandemic has also been used, I think, by the state as an excuse to continue with ensuring that they deny people their rights, especially their freedoms, and entitlements have become more difficult to get, because COVID is a very good excuse now for everything that is not happening. And so our focus has also been to ensure accountability and transparency in all the programs and the attempts of the state government to deal with the pandemic. But I think that in India, the pandemic is a challenge, but because the pandemic is taking place at a time when the regime under which we are living is one which is trying to ensure at all costs that dissenters are put in jail and that we have no right to question, has made it much more difficult. And I think that sort of growing fascism in this country is what worries me more than the pandemic at this moment, because the pandemic will be used also by such forces to take a tighter grip, on all of us. So we have to continue to speak and continue to do whatever we do, even within the restraints which the pandemic has posed.
Yes, I think that is the mantra of the moment, that we continue to speak out and dissent where required, despite the restrictions that the pandemic has put on us. Finally, Angela, I wanted to ask you one thing. Can you tell us about the happiest moment that you have had during your long engagement with the community and through your campaign? What was your happiest moment?
My goodness, I have to pick one. There are always so many moments of
You
joy
can pick
and
a lot.
excitement. One of the happiest, I mean, some of the happy moments is, for instance, as I told you earlier also, our work with the hawkers has been something very special, because in many ways they have taught us so much more, about struggle, about survival, and about actually having fun. So, when they celebrate their annual founding day, it is like a day of total abandonment. And you should see the kind of program that they have. It's all dance and song, and their children are participating, and it just is so reaffirming, because here are people who actually on an everyday basis have to struggle constantly with the police, with the municipal authorities, and many of them, especially, I mean, the hawkers also different categories. There are those who hawk goods which are slightly more, bring in a better income than the one who's just selling kwai on the street. And yet that resilience which they have, is something so joyful. And it's so contagious when you're with them and they're having fun like that, because you realize that we'll struggle, but that is just one part of our life. And that is so much more, to life. And I think I look forward so much every time to their celebration of Founding Day, because they're a very unique association and constantly they reaffirm life, I mean, that's the small victories, of even small things about people securing their maintenance becomes a moment to celebrate, because it shouldn't be that way. Some of these things are so, actually the law is there, you're supposed to go through the process, but these things get so prolonged, so finally when it happens, it becomes a moment.
Thank you so much, Angela, for being with us today and for sharing with us so much, so many inspiring stories about your campaigns, the challenges that you have to overcome, the strategies that's so innovative which you came up with, and also about your happy moments. Thank you so much, and that brings us to the end of this interview today. Thank you.